At the start of the movie, we see young Julie alone inside her family's manor in Ireland. She either reads a book or plays by herself. When she gets bored, she roams around the manor. From inside, she sees the lake that surrounds the property, so she goes out and runs to the forest. She picks flowers along the way and eventually comes to a peaceful brook. She spreads flowers on the water and watches as the stream carries the blooms. Then we jump a couple of years later to 1890, on a midsummer night. We see John, the valet, running, carrying his master's boots. He has just returned from accompanying Miss Julie to attend a party at the barn in celebration of Midsummer. Upon arriving at the manor, he goes directly to the kitchen, where his fiancée Kathleen is preparing his food. As he sits, he remarks about several things. First, he wonders why Miss Julie chose to stay when her father has decided to travel for the occasion. Julie's father, the Baron and the master of the manor, has given John a folder of travel brochures. He wonders how it would feel to travel without any financial worries. The next thing he remarks about is how Miss Julie is so commanding, especially earlier, when she ordered him to dance with her at the barn. That's not how an aristocratic lady like her should be behaving. John pauses with his remarks when Kathleen serves him food. He also requests some wine to pair with it. Then Kathleen goes back to cooking, but this time she cooks dog food. According to her, Miss Julie ordered her to do so because she suspects the dog to be pregnant again, and she wants to give it some medicine. John resumes his remarks. Despite being commanding, Miss Julie looks elegant and magnificent. He gives an example by describing how the mistress sits on a horse, or how well she danced earlier at the barn. Unbeknownst to them, Julie has overheard their conversation. The two servants are surprised to see her there. Julie looks flushed with too much dancing and drinking. Her eyes look expectant as she hears the distant partying. She suddenly asks John to dance with her again. As politely as possible, he refuses, citing two reasons. First, he has promised a dance with Kathleen, and second, it will be suspicious to see the Baron's daughter dancing with the valet again. Julie is annoyed. She says her presence honors the party at the barn. Whomever she dances with shouldn't be a problem. Kathleen convinces her fiancé, and soon Julie and John leave the kitchen. However, once Julie is in the parlor, John chooses not to follow. He closes the door and returns to the kitchen, where Kathleen is already cleaning up. He thinks she's jealous, so he flirts with her. But in truth, Kathleen realizes how controlling their mistress is. For the second time, Julie intrudes on them. She slaps John on the face, chiding him for leaving her. The slap surprises the three of them, and John reiterates that he promised his fiancée a dance. When Julie has calmed down a bit, she orders him to change his jacket to one that is appropriate for dancing. She also attempts to follow him, to ensure he won't leave her again. But Kathleen cuts in and offers to get it. When she gets back, Julie asks her if she and John are indeed engaged, as suggested by the intimate familiarity she saw earlier. Kathleen confirms, and then she asks her mistress if she's also engaged to someone else. Julie refuses to answer. Kathleen asks if she can go to rest, but the mistress ignores her. Once they're alone, Julie compliments John in French. He accepts it in the same language, which impresses Julie. She remarks on how eloquent John is. He reveals that he used to work in a French cafe, and he learned by listening to people. He also adds that his modesty forbids him to believe she can give genuine compliments, so he assumes she's either flattering him or patronizing him. This is understandable, since in his mind, they are not of the same social standing. However, Julie keeps disregarding this notion because of her capriciousness. He also adds that he used to sneak into the Baron's gardens when he was young. He admits to seeing Julie as a kid, but then he refuses to elaborate, thinking Kathleen may overhear. Sensing fun teasing, Julie rushes out of the kitchen and towards Kathleen's room. John follows her. Julie stops in front of the door and says she just heard Kathleen snore. John corrects her, saying that Kathleen doesn't snore, but she talks in her sleep. Then he goes back to the kitchen, leaving Julie flustered at the implication of what he said. She follows the valet into the kitchen. Julie still has a lot of energy left, nervous energy, to be exact, sustained by her earlier drinking and dancing. She orders John to pour both of them a glass of cold beer, to which he obliges. She watches him, and a part of her brain thinks she almost toes the line. Yet she can't stop, because she's been feeling this miserable feeling for a while now. Plus, she likes the notion that she can command him to do anything she wants. She keeps flirting with him, asserting her high status to compel him to do things. It even comes to a point where she orders him to kiss her shoe, just for the fun of it. John reluctantly obeys, tolerating his mistress's whims, but his patience is nearing its limits. He's totally aware of the disparity in their status, and he's at her beck and call. Yet he's growing frustrated at the lack of propriety Miss Julie shows. Does she not truly know the consequences of her actions? John reminds Julie that they shouldn't be seen together. People will think differently if they are seen alone in the kitchen. But Julie is heedless of it, even offering to fetch Kathleen to accompany them. At this point, John shouts at his mistress to leave Kathleen alone. Julie doesn't like being shouted at. He emphasizes that they shouldn't be disturbing those who are resting, especially after a hard day of work. Julie seems to have come to her senses. Instead of insisting, she changes her mind. She wants to pick lilacs with John. The latter refuses, so she just orders him to pick the flowers himself. John obeys. While waiting for him, Julie brings the mugs of beer to Kathleen's room. There she sees her dog resting on the bed. The cook explains what has happened to it. Julie sees that it's being well taken care of, so she allows Kathleen to keep it. Then she offers her John's beer, but the latter refuses. Kathleen asks again if she can rest for the day. This time, Julie leaves her. John returns and arranges the lilacs in a vase. He senses Julie returning to the kitchen. She asks him why he doesn't want to come with her to the garden. She doesn't understand why he's so afraid to be seen alone with her. Her father's away, and surely the other servants won't think she's in love with a valet. If that's the case, she can step down. John tells her not to, or else people will say she's fallen. The word fall reminds Julie of her strange dream. There, she sees herself on top of a column, and she can't get down. She feels scared to fall, yet she's longing for it. If she ever does, she wants to be deep in the earth. John says he's never felt similar sensations, but he does have strange dreams of his own. He says he sees himself below the dark forest, wanting to go over the top of the trees. If only he can reach the first branch, then he can clearly reach the top. John talks about his deceased brother, which makes him emotional. He masks this by pretending something got into his eyes. He attempts to walk away, but Julie orders him to sit. He does. Julie provocatively sits on his lap and takes her time to remove whatever is in John's eyes. She enjoys his discomfort. John is afraid Kathleen or anyone may see them in such a compromising situation. But Julie doesn't care. He warns her that she's playing with fire, which she dismisses. Then he kisses her ardently. Julie is so shocked that she slaps him again. He dislodges her from his lap, even as she calls him out. He says he's tired of playing this game, and he wants to resume his work. He needs to polish the boots for the Baron's return tomorrow. He then goes on to take out the boots and cleaning materials, and aggressively brushes the leather. Despite Julie's attempts to get his attention, even ordering him to polish her boots, he ignores her. Frustrated, he tells her that the Baron is a good master, and that he is not her toy. Finally, she orders him to pour her another glass of liquor. She won't leave him alone. She asks if he's ever been in love. John says he doesn't use that word, but he has liked a lot of girls. Once, he liked a girl, but he couldn't get her. He recalls becoming sick, like a fairy tale prince who couldn't eat or drink because of love. When Julie asks who it was, John confesses it was her. He used to love her. He tells her she has no idea what it is like for people like him, because people like her are always so out of their reach. This is agonizing for him. Julie thinks a breath of fresh air will lighten this tension between them, so, gathering the bottle of liquor and 2 glasses, she orders him to come with her to the nearby forest. Defeated, John obeys. Julie leads them to a secluded, but comfortable, shaded part of the forest. She keeps being oblivious to John's discomfort, because she wants to hear his story. John looks around, afraid that someone may recognize them. But, as ordered, he tells her about his life. He says he grew up in poverty, and his solace was to escape to the Baron's garden, where he first saw her. He admits he always wanted to play with her and touch her. This warms Julie's heart as she continues to listen. John himself starts to feel comfortable, as he recalls a fond memory of getting allergies from a rose bush when he tried to leave the garden. Again, she praises his eloquence, saying he sounds well-read for a servant. He says he learned by eavesdropping on aristocrats. A few minutes later, they return to the manor. Before entering the kitchen, John pulls Julie towards one of the empty hallways of the underground tunnel. Under a ray of daylight, John kisses Julie, then he leaves her. In the kitchen, he muses about his actions. He's aware that he's crossed that line between him and Julie. Yet he can't help but cross it, especially when it's Julie who's been flirting and being open to him. What can he do but taste? As he said earlier, perhaps there isn't quite as much difference as they think between human beings. When Julie enters the kitchen, he asks if he can go to sleep. There's still daylight. but the clock indicates that it's already nighttime. Julie protests and creates excuses. She looks like she doesn't want to be left alone. And since she's focused her attention on John in her mind, she sees it as his duty to abide by her. He reiterates his fear of being seen alone with her, to which she questions if that's really important. Clinging to his remaining patience, he explains that he doesn't want to be ridiculed. He doesn't want to get fired without recommendations. He then orders her to go to bed and pleads with her to take his advice for both their sakes. Their conversation gets cut short when they hear the mob just outside the tunnel's gate. To prove him wrong, Julie naively says they should let the mob come in and see because they like her. But John corrects her. The mob doesn't like her. They only pretend to because she's their mistress. He gives a suggestion that will be a catalyst for their downfall, at least one of them. He insists they should hide in his room instead of hers. He promises to lock his room, and in the event the mob manages to open it, he'll shoot. Julie is hesitant at first, but she gives in. As mentioned earlier, she has no understanding of the consequences of her actions in dismissing the line between their statuses for the sake of fun and flirtation. Inside John's room, Julie sits primly. She knows it's her privilege as the mistress to be served by her valet. Brought upon by earlier tense trifling, influenced by drinking and merriment of the midsummer occasion, the inevitable happens. John and Julie have a coupling. They are not aware that Kathleen is just outside the door, agonized as she hears their heavy breathing. After the deed is done, they both come to their senses, or at least John does. As he cleans himself up, he apologizes. Then he leaves Julie, still on his bed, pondering what has happened. John goes to Kathleen's room. He pleads with her to stay in her room, saying that Miss Julie is uncontrollable. Kathleen is worried, but she follows John's request. When he comes out, he sees Julie walking out of his room, seemingly in a trance, while holding her ruined undergarment. She goes to the kitchen, where he follows her. He tells her of his suspicion that Kathleen may have heard them. Julie asks what they should do. With a valiant effort, John convinces her that what they did was something normal. They are no different from others, who also make love during midsummer nights. He suggests they should run away. He fills Julie's head with dreams and ideals of living in a quiet country while managing a hotel. A preposterous idea, as if they can simply slip under the rug the act they committed. He even suggests hiring Kathleen as the hotel cook. If they choose this path, they will become rich, perhaps richer than the Baron. Julie gets carried away with the visual John is painting for her. But when she demands he tell her he loves her, or otherwise she'll be nothing, and that's when the illusion crumbles. John is blunt enough to say he has no feelings for her. All they need is cold blood and clear heads to plan their escape. Julie is aghast. Didn't he lovingly hold her in his arms earlier? John reminds her that what they did was a huge mistake. Their only way forward is to leave the manor, and to do that, they need Julie's money. But she says she hasn't any. That's when John scoffs, revealing his true self behind the mask of a gentleman. Julie finally comprehends that he only wants her money. She breaks down as all of her illusions of love and being accepted get shattered, not to mention that her pride as an aristocrat is going downhill. He looks at her with disdain and tells her to stop pretending she's special. He says they're even now, so she shouldn't act as high and mighty as she did earlier. He brings out a bottle of wine, which, to Julie's indignation, was stolen from the Baron's cellar. John then admits that when he first saw her, he only wanted her for the warmth of her flesh, and not for such pure, but nonsensical things as love. Julie attempts to gain control of the situation by asserting her rank, but John has had enough. He grabs her by the shoulders and shouts that she has no right to blame him for their situation. She shouldn't be in the kitchen because the servants don't like her and she's not welcomed. Yet she has the gall to throw herself at him because it's fun, and she knows she can abuse her powers. Even the servants don't act as vulgar as Julie did. She looks pitiful as she begs John to help her, now that she realizes her mistake. As she ruminates about her situation, Julie starts drinking again. She recollects her past, especially about her mother. She says her mother didn't want to have a child, and her smiles were inauthentic. Since knowing this, she's felt like a black hole, cut from all that is life, while inside is nothingness. She was taught to distrust and hate all men. She turns to John and tells him she wants to shoot him like a dog. Then she admits her longing to be in another place. She says she feels more secure in her secret garden, outside the manor than in the manor itself. At this point, Julie becomes increasingly detached and removed from reality due to her constant drinking. She won't stop, even when John tells her to. Julie stands beside him by the window and continues to ramble on. She finally says she accepts John's plan. If they run away, They can live their lives as they wish, and they can pass away as they wish. However, John is not willing to do it with her, not the end part. When she reminds him that he has dishonored her, he simply throws her a coin. John is tired of being his mistress's toy, always at her mercy and not treated as a human. They go back and forth, blaming each other for their disgraceful situation. Julie's mood is unpredictable. One moment she's trying to be tough, and the next, she grovels in front of John and kisses his boots. She pleads with him to tell her what to do. In her mind, he is the only one who can show her the way out of the mess she started. She is ready to follow whatever he orders. And so, John tells her to steal her father's money from the library so they can leave. After sending Julie upstairs, John returns to Kathleen's room. She still hasn't slept, and it's almost morning. She helps him dress for the church service later. While dressing up, he expresses his disappointment about Miss Julie. She's not the elegant mistress he expected. Kathleen answers that they're bound to face themselves as less than they have hoped for. Then she realizes what really happened between John and Julie. She gets disgusted with him, saying she can't work in a household where people don't behave decently. John argues that he's found out that aristocrats are no better than them. She shouts back that, if that's the case, then they've lost inspiration to become better themselves. But that's not it, so he has no right to compare himself to their masters. She would have accepted it if he'd cheated with another maid. Kathleen says John is good on his own, but there are differences. Class is class, right there, and then she declares that she'll leave the Baron's employment, and that he should come with her. She can only hope the Baron won't find out what happened on this midsummer night. But before that, they must attend the church service to confess their sins. However, John has made up his mind that he'll push through with his initial plans. John returns to the kitchen and cleans up any possible evidence. Then he raids his office adjacent to the kitchen and packs anything he needs for the journey. He's relying on Julie to follow his instructions. A few moments later, she comes back to the kitchen. She's wearing her shawl, expecting that their leave will happen sooner rather than later. She has also brought her bird cage, which houses her pet canary, and a pouch filled with her father's stolen money. John is taken aback at the sight of her. She looks pale and deranged. It seems like the night's events have taken a toll on her. She doesn't seem to think about what is sensible or urgent. When John says they need to leave soon, she hugs her cage, as it's the only thing she'll be bringing. He strongly disagrees, seeing as it will only slow them down. She then opens the cage and coos to her canary. John gets angry at her lack of urgency. He grabs and beheads it, right in front of Julie. This drives her into another psychotic episode. She goes into a monologue about how she hates him. She grabs the carving knife and waves it threateningly towards him. She then insults him and his decency, and threatens to tell her father about their sin. She even scatters her father's money. A frightened John and a deranged Julie are what Kathleen witnesses when she enters the kitchen. Julie grasps at the last shreds of her sanity as she tries to explain why she must leave with John and where they will go. She even entices Kathleen with her unwanted position as an honorable hotel cook. She picks up the scattered bills as she describes what their life will be. Meanwhile, John goes ahead and shaves his beard. Kathleen takes pity on Miss Julie. She gently pulls her up and guides her to sit. Then she asks John if he'll come with her to church, to which the latter refuses. Kathleen shares her faith with Julie, explaining that there's a higher being who bestows grace on those who deserve it. Even though Julie says she doesn't believe it, Kathleen still tells her that in God's eyes, the last shall be the first and will receive his grace. With that, she leaves them. Julie asks him what he would do if he were in her place. John answers that if he were a woman, he doesn't know. But there is always an option. He picks up the straight razor he used and gives it to her. He implies that she can do it, but he won't do it with her. Julie sighs because she's so tired not only tonight, but she's been feeling that way for a long time. Breaking their silence, one of the bells starts ringing, indicating that the Baron has returned. John answers the call. The Baron wants his boots and his coffee served within half an hour. Julie feels a bit of panic now that her father's here. If she chooses to live, she will have to face his wrath and bear the shame. John knows what she wants to do, but she doesn't know how to do it. So she pleads with John to give her a command. Despite everything that has happened that night, John still sees himself as a servant serving Julie as his mistress. Therefore, he can't simply tell her what to do, especially when the consequences will be dire and irrevocable. Yet Julie instructs him. This is the least he can do for her, to free her soul from suffering. She grabs his hands as she awaits his orders, and so he puts the razor on her hands as he tells her to go to the barn and use it there. He instructs her to use the tunnel to leave the manor, so she won't meet her father. Then, he puts all the money inside the pouch and gives it to her as well. Julie does as instructed, looking like she's in a trance. John does his tasks as expected, knowing that he's sent his mistress to her doom. Instead of going to the barn, Julie heads to her secret garden, where the little brook is. She has gathered flowers along the way, just as she has done before whenever she escapes there. As John says, she's not among the firsts anymore. Not an aristocrat who orders servants on a whim, but a person who has fallen so low that she's now among the lasts, along with him. Perhaps, in that thought, she can find the peace that has been eluding her all her life. She throws the flowers into the brook, and soon, its waters fill with fragrant petals floating on red.